นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, everyone. One of the biggest frustrations practitioners of the Dhamma face is the gap between what they know intellectually and what they can actually practice moment by moment, day by day. We regularly talk about how we understand some of the basic concepts of Buddhism, such as the Four Noble Truths, the Arya Satya Dhamma. We understand the basic idea of dukkha, suffering, its origin, its craving and clinging, nirodha, the cessation of suffering, and magga, the fourth noble truth, the path of practice that leads to the end of suffering. Every time we hear a talk or read a book, it reminds us of these truths. Maybe it helps us to deepen our understanding, get a clearer picture of what they are. But then the problem is putting them into practice in daily life. And we all know what that's like. We fall down straight away. And everything happens so fast. You've read the books, you've heard the talks, and then you're in a situation at work or at home or any time, any place, and before you've even recited the first noble truth, the word dukkha, or what you have to do with dukkha, which is just know it, comprehend it, before you've even said that or thought that, it's happened. You're already in the dukkha. Or you're trying to observe where is your craving, where is your clinging, where is it coming from, what can you do about it, and already it's happening, isn't it? It's just so fast. And the words on the book are one thing, the experience in reality is another. And it's very frustrating. If we could blame someone for all of this, the suffering we get into, the restlessness, the disappointments, then we would run after them, blaming them, wanting to punish them or get them. And sometimes we do that in certain situations. We go straight to blaming others. But even when we're just quietly on our own, but suffering takes over the mind so quickly that we can't yet let it go, we'll blame ourselves. Some of the time we don't even get the time to label anything. It's just feelings and emotions whiz up, rush up into our experience in a situation where we just react, or it seems so habitual, so fast, so automatic. But what can you do? You have to just keep practicing and shortening that gap between the intellectual knowledge and the teachings we've heard and can remember, and the experience of the Four Noble Truths in practice, having enough awareness to see them and react accordingly or respond accordingly when we recognize a craving and attachment arising and we know that it's the cause of suffering, to respond quickly to identify and let go of the craving, the attachment. This is about practice, isn't it? In the beginning it's slow, we're clumsy. Maybe literally we're sitting there going, what is dukkha? What is the cause of dukkha? What is the right practice to do now? Trying to think it through, and already the mind is full of suffering of one kind or another, or the body is suffering, the mind is suffering. And we're just sitting there trying to think it through. Still a long way off letting go of anything. Just trying to get a grasp of what the situation is and what's happening, what's unfolding before us. Especially if other people involved. If you're with your family or your friends or you're at work, to sit down and work out which part of the Four Noble Truths is happening right now as you're talking to someone or dealing with somebody. There's just not enough time, is there? From what I can see, though, the way the Dhamma progresses, the way our practice progresses, is that, well, you have to keep coming back to reading or listening to the Dhamma, and then you have to keep reflecting on it over and over again, and then keep coming back to cultivating the different aspects of the path, particularly the fourth Noble Truth, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, mindfulness and wisdom, until some of that intellectual knowledge, the emotional balance of meditation and mindfulness, and then the seeing of the Four Noble Truths in our experience, until it all matches up and it's more natural through experience, that you just know something is to be abandoned or something is to be cultivated. Something is dukkha that just has to be endured. Something is dukkha that can be abandoned because it's coming from craving and attachment. At first we're just trying to think it all through. So this is a process of waking up to the truth, training the mind to see, to know the truth. And through practice that process will speed up. But it requires that practice and effort, regular practice and effort. At first, because dukkha is painful, whether it's just mental pain or physical pain, just to know dukkha requires a lot of patient effort. To be with dukkha, to know dukkha as dukkha. And particularly, to know the kind of dukkha that we can let go of as opposed to the kind of dukkha that we just need to endure. The difference between the first and the second arrow, or the arrow that is just an ordinary arrow into the body, just like, say, if you have a bit of pain in your body or some illness, and then the second arrow, which has some poison on it, which is the endless mental proliferation and worrying, anxiety, worry, aversion, irritation, frustration, the kind of dukkha that we can know and let go of. We have to keep practicing till we can separate the two and practice accordingly in the moment. And know, this is something I just need to endure, or this is something that I'm making worse through my unskillful thinking, unmindful thinking and worrying. But you get to know yourself and you get to know how you react to different situations through the practice. If you keep practicing, weeks, months, years go by, but then the speed by which you can identify dukkha, its cause, and the way of practice to get out of it, and the appropriate way of practice in that situation, you get better at that. And that's what we mean by experience in the practice. Until you just know things without having to think it all through, without having to sit there having a big discussion with yourself, or what do I need to do about this kind of suffering I'm experiencing. You actually get to the point where you just know, oh, this is suffering, drop it. This is like a hot coal. If you keep the hot coal there in your hand, you'll burn. So drop it. That's what we mean by experience in the practice. But gaining that kind of experience, understanding, insight, it's a process of training and practice. Some people are quicker than others. In Buddhism we say, well, they're people who maybe been doing it before, and they've taken up their practice from maybe where they left off in the past. But others are new to the practice. If you're new to something, you have to accept it will take time. It doesn't mean to say you can't do it, but you just have to be willing to give yourself that time. And what helps? Well, listening to the Dhamma regularly so that you can reflect on it often will help. Help keep you on the right path, not just keep you practicing, but keep you practicing in the right way. Because we often listen to things and read things and get information that takes us in the wrong direction, distracts us or is incorrect. So listening to the good Dhamma from a good teacher will help. But then also being willing to put it into practice and test yourself. Find out for yourself from what you've heard until you can see for yourself what is what. The teachings we hear and read are what we call samuti panyati. They're the written word or the spoken word. And they're necessary, they're helpful for the practice. It gives you the picture, the framework, the structure for understanding things. You're linking ideas together, giving you ways of practice. But then the kind of knowledge that will actually end your suffering is a little bit deeper, more profound than that. It's seeing the true nature of things, even recognizing that the words themselves are still impermanent and not self. It's part of the practice. Getting the right attitude to the Dhamma that you've heard, recognizing the difference, say, between what you've heard and what you actually know and see for yourself. It's not always straightforward. So in the beginning we tend to attach to the words. You might say that's not wrong either, because we need to attach to something in order to practice properly. You attach to the instructions on meditation and what you're looking for, what kind of insights to develop, what kind of qualities to develop. So you attach to that. But then later you also have to be able to recognize, well, are those qualities present or not? Are you really aware of things as experiences as they are arising, or are you just remembering the words? And that takes time. It's a process of waking up to the truth, awakening yourself and knowing, learning from your experience. So we talk a lot about cultivating samadhi, developing mindfulness and developing states of calm, stillness, peace. What is that? What does it feel like? What is the state of peace? There's peace and there's peace, isn't there? There's like momentary peace where your mind just seems to drop everything and become very still and quiet, and it's not sleepy, it's not restless or agitated. There's usually a good feeling comes up, feeling of contentment, well-being, and inner happiness. But these are things we have to get to know and experience for ourselves, and so we can recognize them, maybe recognize them many, many times until we can cultivate and bring up those qualities quite quickly because we know them, we're familiar with them. But you have to know that through experience, through practice. Similarly, the obstacles to samadhi, the obstacles, what we call the mental defilements and the hindrances, you have to get to know them too. Not just the words, but actually to recognize irritation and aversion as irritation and aversion. What's it like? What does it do to the mind? How does it feel? How does it manifest? What are its causes? What brings it up? When it's in your experience, what it feels like, what it does to the mind, and then how does it pass? Same with the other kinds of hindrances. Worry, anxiety, fear, jealousy. We don't have to go and create those things, but when they come up, do we know them as they are? Because if you really know a hindrance as a hindrance, you'll want to let it go quickly. It's a hot coal to be put down because you can see it. Its harmful side, it agitates the mind. You might say that's one of the aims of the practice, to get to the point where you can recognize a hindrance as a hindrance. Greed, desire, frustration, jealousy, all the different mental obstacles that come up, to be able to recognize them for what they are, to know what they do, and to realize that these are things to be abandoned. So recognizing the skillful good qualities of mind that we can develop, and recognizing the unskillful qualities that we can get caught into, knowing the difference, knowing what to do with each. One is to be cultivated, one is to be abandoned. You might say, as we become more familiar with the practice, we get quicker at doing that. Not willing to let the hindrance or the kilesa sit in the mind for very long. Or at least if it's still in the mind, we can't shake it off, to know this is something I have to keep working at until I can let it go. You might call that wisdom or insight, where you know something. If you're caught into some kind of clinging and identification with a certain state of mind that's agitating, to know, oh, this is something I have to work with. And then to have enough patience to keep working with it. None of us can just let go of things just like that from day one in the practice. You have to keep working through, as a process, working through recognizing, letting go, finding skillful ways to let go. And sometimes we have to just be very patient. Sometimes we have to bring up mindfulness, and mindfulness alone is enough. Sometimes we have to bring up the opposite. When you're angry, to be able to have enough awareness to say, oh, I really need to cultivate kindness and compassion with a state of mind until it subsides. Or to bring up the mindfulness to see the impermanence, to see, oh, this state of mind will change. I've seen it change before. If I keep mindfully watching, I know it will change again. As Ajahn Chah said to the lady with the anger problem, get your clock out. Just set your clock and ask yourself, how long is this going to last? If you are really your anger, you should be able to command it to be there for 2 hours, okay? Or be angry for 2 hours and then stop. Should be able to stop and start at will if it's yours, if you are your anger or your fear or your greed or your worry. You should be able to control it like that. Use a clock and time it. But we can't, can we? Because it comes through causes and conditions. Sometimes we have strong negative emotions that come up. There's causes. Things have happened in the past, things we are expecting and wanting in the present, and then we're not getting what we want, so it leads to frustration, disappointment in the present. The causes, the conditions are there. That's what we have to look for, understand, rather than just clinging to the disappointment, the frustration, the sadness, just to know, oh, this has come about because of one thing or a number of things. Usually there's multiple factors, aren't there? But applying the Dhamma, that's the fourth noble truth, applying mindfulness and the patience and the discernment, investigating it, until we can just see, oh, that's just the way it is. I didn't get what I want, the conditions weren't right. And then your mind can accept the truth and let go. It's like the guy I was talking to earlier, he's got a problem with another person at work, but because he's been working for 20 odd years at that job, he's seen people like this before. Oh, this person, they don't cooperate, they don't change, they don't listen, they won't do the job. The first time you encounter that, it's difficult, isn't it? What do you do with this person who won't listen, won't do the job? But if you've encountered that person before and you patiently work with the situation, work with yourself in that situation, let go of your own reactions, and then maybe that person, they change for the better, or they move on, or the situation wasn't as bad as you realized or thought at the time. And then you go through it once, and the next time you meet another person like that, well, you know, oh, I've seen this before, I've been with this before. It will pass, it will change. There's no need to get stressed about this because I've been through it before. That's progress, isn't it? That's using the Dhamma to solve a problem, and you get better at solving the problem through practice and through effort. Over time, maybe what used to take days of frustration, thinking about it, worrying about it, eventually it reaches a point where you can just say, oh yeah, I know this, I just have to accept it, it's unpleasant, but I'll be with it, be patient, and I'm not going to create any extra suffering out of it. I'm not going to put poison on the arrow tip, or I'm not going to shoot a second arrow. I'll just be with it and carry on. In the end, if somebody else is not behaving correctly, well, that's their karma, isn't it? Your karma is, well, you have to be involved with them. But really the biggest problem is for them, and they have to sort that out. Your job is not to make it worse. That's the Four Noble Truths in practice. In not making things worse, not creating problems out of things that don't have to be problems. Being patient with the things you can't change, but also seeing where you can change your own mind in a situation. Once you've seen impermanence once, then you can see it again and again and again, and you just keep applying it, don't you? It's worked before, it can work again. And you know, oh, this will pass, this will change. My feeling is just a feeling, my thought is just a thought. Things arise and pass away. You've seen them arise and pass away before. You can see them arise and pass away again. That's suffering and the end of suffering in practice. And if you keep practicing like that regularly, maybe you don't have to think a lot about it at all. It's just knowing the noble truths in daily life as they manifest, as they appear. When it comes to suffering, that you can't change, and maybe all you need to do is establish mindfulness and say, oh, that's it, I can't change this. I'm just going to have to be with this. And that's not being weak, it's just knowing the way things are. That's wisdom. That's being smart, and that's being strong. Knowing that this is something that you can't change, that's it, that's the Dhamma of the Buddha. When you get ill, you have injury or illness, and you know you're going to have to be with it until things improve, till you get the treatment or the treatment works, then you accept it with mindfulness, with insight, and you know it's impermanent. If you don't accept it, then your mind is going to keep complaining, keep worrying. You're going to be both sick in the body and sick in the mind. So one who keeps practicing with the Noble Truths, generally they become more and more familiar. The terms, the concepts, the words are there in the mind. And then the recall, the mindfulness and the recall, the memory of them is there. And it's rather than just succumbing to the suffering all the time, you just say, oh, it's just suffering. It's just the way it is, if there is suffering, but not creating any extra or additional, and Lumpur Cha called extraordinary suffering out of the situation. It's just like that. It's just the way it is. Where does suffering come from? It comes from clinging, which comes from craving. We cling, meaning we identify with the thing. The official term is atawada upadana, clinging to self-view, clinging to a view that is not in line with reality. You want something that you haven't got, so you suffer. Or you got something that you don't want, and you suffer. The more you want, the more you suffer. If you can see that, then you stop identifying and clinging, and then the mind can be peaceful, even when there's something painful that you're having to put up with. Or there's something good that you're missing out on, separation from all you love and like. That happens every day, isn't it? There's always something that you want that you haven't got. But if you can see it as Dhamma, as the Four Noble Truths, you can be with it. So the Four Noble Truths are a teaching that the Buddha encouraged us to practice, to reflect on and bring into our lives, bring into our daily life. Understand better, what is this? What am I facing? What am I experiencing here? Where does it fit into the framework of the Four Noble Truths? Being impatient just to know the Dhamma itself can be a problem, can't it? You want to know, you want to be peaceful, you want to be wise. That's another form of wanting, isn't it? At first you just have to recognize that, catch it as it comes out. Oh, this desire for the truth, desire for peace, the desire to know. Sometimes we react to it by just asking questions endlessly, thinking the more questions we ask, we'll get something that quietens the minds down, brings us closer to the Dhamma. And of course, asking questions is a useful part of the practice, but it has its limitation, doesn't it? It has its time, has its place. We also need to be able to just watch, be patient enough, quiet enough, mindful enough to watch, and apply the questioning maybe just in our own experience internally. That takes time. That's why the Buddha encouraged us to practice mindfulness every day. Some sitting, some walking, chanting, listening to Dhamma, this all helps. Because it helps you to train the mind to turn back and watch itself, learn from its own experience. So for tonight, I'll just leave you with these teachings, and after this, there'll be a chance for some questions and answers.